I'm Andrew Wallace, and welcome to the We've Got a Problem podcast, where each week we explore inspiring stories of struggle, success, and solutions to prevalent problems, and our guests have turned problems into opportunities. This week I'm joined by Adriane Daly, a hypnotist who started specializing in helping people get rid of their addiction to alcohol, sober herself for more than 9 years. She's formed her business, Mind-Aligned Hypnosis, on the belief that the kind of accepted mainstream approaches to personal issue resolution just aren't as effective as we'd like. Adriane, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
So talk to me a little bit about your own personal journey before we talk about your process. Like I said, you've been sober for more than 9 years. What was it like before you got sober?
It started probably when I was like 17. It's fun. Alcohol is a great thing. You go away to college, and I just really enjoyed partying. And then I just couldn't do anything without it. It just became a part of my life. I couldn't hold a job. It was to the point when I decided to get sober, it was like I had to or else. I had an accident. I had fallen down the stairs, broke my jaw. I was drinking. And I had to go, after I had that surgery, because of the state of my liver, they sent me to the liver transplant guy just so the doctor could talk to me, right?
Oh, wow.
And his solution was to move to Saudi Arabia. I was like, what? He's like, yeah, they don't drink there. Have you ever considered leaving the country? And he was serious. The first year I said I was going to get sober, I ended up in detox multiple times and did the rehab thing. Relapsed the first day I got out. The second I got home, I walked back to that liquor store. And then I lived in a sober house for 8 months, and I relapsed a few times in there. And then it was just the right one for me, and it stuck. And so that was over 9 years ago. And
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
And it was difficult at the beginning, you're holding on to your sobriety, but that's one of the things that I kind of want to change our mindset around, because we don't have to identify as alcoholic for the rest of your life.
Right.
When you remove why you do something, that thing is no longer a problem or a solution.
Right.
So you just are living, right?
Absolutely.
So the first year I was definitely holding on to a degree, but at one point I just started living. So now it's like I could go to parties, I could serve it, I could buy it. It just doesn't bother me anymore. Yeah. And then I got into this. I had just started the business in January, finally finding a method where I felt I could give back in that field.
Yes. So what's different about your process than, we talked a little bit before we got on about how you feel that there are things that are missing from the mainstream approach. I know that the statistics on relapse and things like that still aren't very good as far as preventing relapse and preventing people from struggling a lot as they go through their journey. So what is different about the Mind-Aligned Hypnosis process?
So AA is wonderful for connecting people. And I utilized AA for about 1.5 or 2 years at the beginning of my sobriety. But it only has a 15% success rate for keeping people sober.
15?
Yes.
15. We wouldn't put up with that in any other way, shape, or form. That would be totally unacceptable in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. And they say that rehab, 85% of people relapse within the first year after. So that's another 15% success rate. Our problems are in the subconscious mind. But these methods, the AA and rehabs often go along 12-step programs. They all deal with our conscious. They don't tap into exactly why each person is running on the behavior. It more tackles the behavior, like the drinking. And that's just the symptom of the problem. So hypnosis kind of fell off the earth at some point. You don't really hear, usually when we think about hypnosis, we think about, smoking, quitting smoking or weight loss are the two main ones that I think people usually think about. But it really is the way to tackle our outside issues by tapping into the mind that holds the problem.
What really strikes me about that is that if you were conscious of it, if you actually knew what you were doing, why you were doing it, I think you wouldn't be so likely to keep doing something, because you would understand the cognitive dissonance of I shouldn't drink. And we try and get away from the word should in any way, shape, or form. But I shouldn't be drinking. It's having an effect on my life. It's keeping me from maximizing my potential, and yet I do it. And I want to quit, but do I actually? Consciously, not realizing that subconsciously you don't yet want to quit. I don't know enough about it. That's obviously why we're talking, or we wouldn't need to chat about this in the first place. But the fact is, most people are not fully aware of what's going on in the subconscious.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like 95% of our life is driven by the subconscious. So and it could be with alcohol or weight loss. You wake up in the morning and you have this conscious logic of, I want to lose weight. I want to quit drinking. It's going to do this and this and this for me.
Sure.
But then all of a sudden, later in the day, you are acting on the behavior. Your program has kicked in, and something stronger than those logical thoughts is running the behavior.
Yeah.
And it's actually because our problems have a purpose. They're there. They're either going to protect us, to punish us, or to prioritize us, to give attention. So somewhere in your mind is holding on to that behavior because it is serving a purpose for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so through the hypnosis process, you start to uncover those things, why what the purpose was that your mind is trying to hold on to these things for.
Yeah. So the method that I use is quite different than when we think of a deep relaxation and being given suggestions in hypnosis. That is effective to a degree, but sometimes those are also suggestions of someone else. Those aren't suggestions that our own mind came up with, right? So we can either negate them, or they can hold on for a little bit, but then our hardwired program will come back in. So the method that I use is, the client is fully awake, and it seems like a conversation. But when we start talking about our problems, we give a lot of conscious information and a bit of subconscious. And it is my job to pull that subconscious information out, because once it comes to the conscious, it's realized that it doesn't work. It doesn't make sense.
Right. Then finally you get the cognitive dissonance fully exposed, that there is. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's like, what? Okay. And then that reality collapses, and the mind actually then has access to all the other resources that we've learned in our life up until now.
That's kind of mind-blowing, because if you think about it, you've squirreled this away in an area that you can't even actually deal with it, right? You've stuffed it into the subconscious, and once it's out there, now you do have resources that you can deal with it. Now you can actually handle it, work on it, unpack it, all those things. That's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And our problems are really tight thought loops. So until we bring the subconscious information forward and collapse that and break that thought loop, those resources are just bouncing off the problem. They can't get in and be part of our reality.
Part of the show that I kind of am really looking into is how the decisions that we make affect our lives, how we transform, what drives the change, how we stick to it, those kinds of things. So somebody's made the decision to come into your office. I suppose you do this in person.
I do it actually all online.
You do? Oh, yeah. Fantastic. Even better. Okay.
Yeah. It's just as effective. It's wonderful.
Which again, shattering misconceptions here.
Yeah.
The part of the question is, okay, somebody has made the decision consciously to let go of their addiction and has sought you out. How many sessions does it take before you've really started to make a change that they're able to stick to it?
So I'm saying right now 1 to 3 sessions.
1 to 3. Fantastic.
I want to become a master at this and just have it one.
Wouldn't we all? Yeah.
Yeah. But the process is very quick once you bring forward that subconscious information. And my sessions aren't timed.
Okay.
So they can be, my shortest session has been a half an hour. My longest has been about 2.5 hours. But we just want to get the client to have the realizations that they need. The change is a lot faster than, just talking about the problem without utilizing where the problem is.
Mm-hmm. Part of what I'm curious about is it seems like addicts, just from observation, oftentimes until they've hit that rock bottom that you talk about, that either it was going to kill me or I was going to get sober, mm-hmm. that until they hit that point, there's always a little bit of a dependency, wanting somebody else to do it for them. What would you say is the biggest hurdle to people getting well from your treatment?
So that is a big one, is kind of giving the responsibility onto someone else, like you fix me, because I am a bit of a guide. It mm-hmm. is actually the client who does the work. So it's taking off that responsibility from myself. Also is the need to direct the client in a certain way, which was actually quite challenging for me when I started doing this, because when you're sitting in a position of assisting someone, we already have our own views and what's right and what's wrong in the world, right? Mm-hmm. Or like if someone's sitting in front of you telling you a problem, you've got all these wonderful resources that have worked for you and you want to assist them. But that is not our job, not to give advice, not to direct the client in any way, because even if they came to a resource that worked for you as well, they have to come to it themselves. That
is something that matters however you talk to people, just in your day-to-day life.
I mean, that's just a general, with advice. Like we can give somebody, you can receive the most logical advice, but if you give it, someone can right away negate it because maybe they've tried it before for some reason. There's a bunch of reasons why it's not going to work in their life. And you may have just taken that resource away from them because they've all of a sudden created so many reasons of why that won't work. Even when you're helping a friend, just listen, right? Yeah. We really don't know what's best for anybody.
Well, and that's part of my problem is I know what's best for everybody, right? You sit there and you go, no, you don't, because you're not them. Mm-hmm. I am not you, and there's no possible way. I'm not in their shoes. It's hard when somebody offers you a problem. You sometimes, I'm sure, have a very clear concept of what steps people need to follow to improve their situation, and you can't say it because
you can't even slyly direct in any sort of way. But I also recognize now that because all of our issues on the outside are just symptoms, like a few people might have a drinking problem, but the way that we got there is completely different. I'm a part of recovery groups, like Facebook groups. And a lot of the time you see this exact same advice of what we know the steps are going to be. Someone posts that they're in a tough spot, and then it's the exact same advice. And I just know that if I was in that person, like, I don't want to hear that advice.
Well,
right? As good as logical and as good as it may be, it's like,
In a sense, maybe not completely, but they already know that advice. They've already heard it. They're already aware of it. Do you talk to a smoker and you go, they know they need to quit. They knew they shouldn't be doing it. Chances are these days, the moment they picked up that first cigarette, and yet they did it. So they don't need to hear the advice. They need to actually still come to it inside.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that's where their own mind clicks, and then they have that lasting resolution.
I'm really intrigued because we've got a serious problem at least in the U.S., and I have to imagine that the statistics are somewhat similar in Canada. But I know in the U.S., according to the National Institute of Health, 25.8% of people ages 18 and older reported that they engaged in binge drinking in the past month. 14.5 million people ages 12 and older had an alcohol use disorder. And of those, only 7.2% of them had received any treatment in the past year. This is a travesty. This is a crisis level situation that we're dealing with. Alcohol misuse is calculated to have cost the United States $249 billion in 2010.
Yeah.
And according to the World Health Organization, among people ages 15 to 49, alcohol misuse was the first leading risk factor for premature death and disability.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. Yeah. I question things, and I just wonder, why are the mainstream ways that we look at resolving alcoholism, why are they all conscious solutions? Yes. Because the problem is not in our conscious. And those solutions will be like the intentions when you wake up in the morning, of just having a good intention. But then if we don't resolve why,
right,
which just seems very common sense to me, that there would be mainstream solutions that involve the subconscious.
Yeah. There is that concept of, if you find yourself in a hole, first stop digging. All the intention you want, well, my intention is to get out of this hole. Well, we need to take the shovel out of your hands, so to speak. How did we come to it that we've ignored in the mainstream for so long that it's not a conscious issue?
Yeah, I mean, I did a little video recently on, because I had seen my doctor and we were talking about this line of work that I was in. And he said that he was trained in hypnosis before drug companies came out with anxiety and depression medication. That's what he would use on his patients effectively. And then the medications came out and they're like, let's get the quick fix.
Don't do that anymore.
So, yeah.
Speaking of seeing your doctor and all those things, that people with alcohol use disorder are more likely to seek care from their physician for an alcohol-related medical problem rather than for drinking too much. Yeah.
I totally agree with that. And that's the other thing, is trying to get people to have the awareness that the solution may be the problem. Yeah. Right? Because we're like, well, no, it's not the alcohol. The alcohol is what makes me calm. It takes away my anxiety. It's like, no. Hypnosis has fallen through the cracks a little bit. There's a lot of those assumptions, like, am I going to be quacking like a duck? And am I going to be doing these outlandish things that you have some sort of,
part of it is, I think people poo-poo it because they don't understand what it is, right? There's a lack of understanding on what's going to happen. And also, what so many people want is they want to take a pill and be better for whatever it is. People look at those things and go, well, talking to somebody couldn't possibly work.
We want that quick fix. But the other thing that people don't recognize about hypnosis is that it can be a quick fix. Once you find those beliefs that are running your show and switch them, your outside behavior does change. So it can be that quick fix. My business model is to have clients come and I don't want to see them again. So it's not the best business model.
Your business model is if you're effective, if you were really effective, you put yourself out of work.
I want you in and out.
Right. Well, that's a brilliant strategy. I do at times wonder whether certain therapists are like, well, I don't want to actually help, because if I helped, then they'd stop coming. They wouldn't be here next week. They'd be out of it. But that's fantastic. So if you want to know more about Adriane, go to mindalignedhypnosis.com, or you can check her out on Facebook at facebook.com/Adriane Daily or Instagram at adriandaily.mindaligned. I'll have those links in the description as well, so you don't have to try and spell them or find them. But thank you so much for joining me this week. I really appreciate it. It's been a fascinating conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.